America knows her as the calm voice on their screens, the woman who never breaks, never raises her voice, never lets the world see her shake. But behind that steady smile is a lifetime of storms she survived in silence. From a lonely Wyoming childhood to the brutal pressures of the White House, from career collapse to exile in a foreign country, from private heartbreaks to the grief that almost shattered her. This is the story of how Dana Perino built her strength from places no camera ever recorded. A story not of fame but of grit, loss, love, and the quiet battles that shape a soul. Some public figures earn respect because they are skilled at their job, but others earn it because people feel something deeper behind their calm. Dana Perino belongs to the second group. Millions of Americans see her on television, hear her voice during important national moments, and believe they understand who she is. They see a woman who speaks clearly, stays steady under pressure, and rarely shows emotion in public. To the audience, she looks like someone who was always confident, always prepared, and always in control. But her life has a much deeper story, one that most people never hear about. Behind the steady tone and professional smile is a history shaped by discipline, hardship, personal loss, and years of pushing forward even when life felt heavy. The calm people admire today was built slowly, through experiences that never made it into any news headline. Dana's public image often makes people think she grew up with advantages or came from a political family. But that is not true. She started from a small town, worked her way up through effort alone, and reached the White House through persistence rather than privilege. Viewers today see the polished version of her, sitting beside co-anchors on Fox News or interviewing senators and experts. They see a respected professional. They see someone who never appears shaken, even when discussing difficult or emotional topics. But viewers only see the part of her life she chooses to show. They do not see the nights of doubt, the moments she questioned her own strength, the personal sacrifices she made, or the grief she carried quietly while still showing a composed face to the public. Dana became a familiar name to Americans when she served as the White House press secretary. For many people, that role defines how they remember her. Standing at the podium, answering questions from reporters, and speaking on behalf of the president. It was a position that required discipline, accuracy, and emotional control every single day. After leaving the White House, she entered national media and joined Fox News, where she became even more well-known. Her roles on shows like The Five and America's Newsroom turned her into a trusted voice for millions who rely on her calm explanations during political tension, breaking news, or national challenges. To viewers, she seems almost unshakable. But no one becomes that calm without a story behind it. When people see someone successful today, they often imagine their life was always stable. They assume confidence comes naturally. But Dana's strength was shaped by real experiences that many people never hear about. Her childhood had moments of uncertainty. Her early career had setbacks that left her unsure if she would ever succeed. Her personal life had losses that left marks she does not talk about often. None of these things show up on camera, but they shaped her into the person Americans admire today. Her discipline was learned. Her calm was practiced. Her strength was built through years of showing up even on days she felt overwhelmed or exhausted. When the camera lights turn on, viewers see only the polished version of her life. They do not see the young woman who once struggled to find her place in Washington. They do not see the quiet moments when she doubted whether she belonged in the world of politics. They do not see the nights she worked long hours behind the scenes, hoping that her effort would one day be recognized. They do not see the personal sacrifices that came with choosing a career that demanded so much time, energy, and emotional control. They do not see the moments when she felt alone, even while standing in some of the most important rooms in the country. Many public figures hide their private challenges because the world expects strength. Dana learned early in her career that showing too much emotion could be misunderstood or criticized. so she built a way of carrying herself that gave others confidence in her, even on days she struggled internally. She learned to speak calmly when she felt pressure. She learned to stay composed when facing criticism. She learned to put the needs of her job above her own feelings. Over time, this became the version of her that people recognized and respected. But beneath that calm exterior is a real person, with real fears, real worries, and real memories that shaped her. The purpose of telling her story is to reveal the full picture, not just the polished part. It is to show that her strength did not come from an easy life. It came from learning how to move forward, even when life tested her. It came from growing up with modest beginnings. It came from long hours of work that few people knew about. It came from moments where she had to start over. It came from personal losses that hurt deeply, but taught her to value the people she loved. It came from experiences that built her character long before anyone in America knew her name. This story also helps explain why people feel connected to her. When someone communicates with steady confidence, viewers often sense something beneath the surface, even if they cannot fully identify what it is. They sense sincerity. They sense empathy. They sense maturity. These qualities usually come from a life where someone has faced challenges and learned from them. In Dana's case, her calm is not a natural personality trait. It is the result of years of experience, introspection, and growth. The woman people see today did not appear overnight. She was shaped gradually, through situations that demanded patience, discipline, and emotional control. Millions think they know Dana Perino because they see her on television almost every day. But the truth is, they only see the part of her life she allows the public to see. The deeper story, the one filled with early struggles, private heartbreaks, and defining experiences, remains mostly hidden. This is the story that explains her strength. This is the story that shows how she became the voice people trust today. And this is the story that reveals the human being behind the public image. But to understand the woman the world trusts today, we must begin where no cameras ever existed. Some places simply hold memories, but some places shape a person at the deepest level. Dana Perino's earliest years were spent in Evanston, Wyoming, and even though she was too young to understand the world around her, that environment left marks that stayed with her for life. Wyoming was not a place filled with noise or crowds. It was open, quiet, and often demanding in its own way. Her family lived modestly, and life there was simple but steady. Even though she left when she was only 2 years old, the stories she later heard from her parents and the feelings she carried with her created an understanding that her character started forming there. The wide spaces, the plain routine, and the strong people around her gave her an early sense of seriousness and responsibility that would follow her throughout her life. The early atmosphere of Wyoming taught her something many children do not learn until much later. It taught her that life doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes lessons come through silence, through learning to stay calm, and through accepting that you cannot change certain things around you. Even as a little child, she absorbed the way her family lived. They didn't complain. They didn't talk more than necessary. They focused on what needed to be done each day. These quiet values shaped her first understanding of how people behave during difficult moments. She learned early that being steady is not about pretending to be strong. It is about staying centered, even when the world feels uncertain. Her family did not have much money, but they had structure and discipline. Her parents believed in working hard, meeting responsibilities, and not making excuses. Her father, Leo, had a way of paying attention to the world. Even after long days at work, he would sit with the newspaper and follow national and international news carefully. Dana didn't understand any of it at first, but she watched him. She saw how seriously he took information. She saw how important it was to stay informed. This small habit became one of the first seeds of interest in communication, news, and public life that would later grow into her career. Her mother played a different but equally important role. She taught Dana how to handle emotions quietly and respectfully. She showed her that you do not always need to respond loudly or dramatically when something upsets you. Instead, you take a breath, think before reacting, and choose your words with care. This kind of emotional control became one of Dana's strongest traits as an adult. Many people later admired her calmness on television or in the White House, but that calmness was rooted in lessons learned from her mother during early childhood. When the family moved to Denver, the shift was difficult, even if Dana could not fully express it at such a young age. Wyoming had become part of her early identity, even if she could not verbalize that connection. Leaving it created a feeling of loss that she didn't understand then but recognized later in life. Denver was bigger, busier, and less predictable. Although it offered more opportunities, it also removed her from the quiet comfort that Wyoming had given her. Children often struggle with change without knowing how to explain it, and Dana was no different. She felt out of place, and that small sense of displacement stayed with her as a memory she would only make sense of as an adult. Growing up in Denver, Dana's family continued to live modestly. There were no luxuries, no special privileges. Everything they achieved came from effort and discipline. She learned early that if she wanted something, she needed to earn it. She watched her parents manage the household carefully, choosing needs over wants and teaching her the difference between the two. That kind of upbringing helped her avoid entitlement and taught her to stay grounded even when she later reached national attention. As she got older, her father introduced her more intentionally to news and public affairs. He believed that it was important to understand what was happening in the country and to pay attention to leadership and decisions. He didn't push his opinions on her. Instead, he taught her how to listen and how to ask questions. Instead of telling her what to think, he showed her how to think. These quiet evenings with the newspaper became some of the earliest steps toward the career Dana eventually built in communication, politics, and journalism. Her mother, on the other hand, helped her develop emotional strength. She taught Dana to stay composed when things didn't go her way. She taught her to stay polite, even when she felt frustrated. She taught her to observe people before reacting. These lessons helped shape her social awareness, her communication style, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. Years later, when millions watched her speak from behind the White House podium, they saw the result of these early teachings. Childhood also brought small emotional wounds that Dana carried quietly. Some of these were simple childhood losses that still hurt deeply, like losing a favorite book or leaving a place she loved. Others were moments when she felt she needed to grow up faster than other children because her family's modest life required responsibility. She learned early that life doesn't always wait for you to feel ready. These small experiences taught her how to be resilient even before she knew the meaning of the word. They also taught her to value the people who stood by her and the routines that gave her stability. Even though Wyoming was only a brief part of her childhood, it became a symbol for something she held inside for years, the idea that she came from simplicity, silence, and steady routines. Denver added new challenges and new lessons, but Wyoming remained the beginning of her story. In later years, when she described her life, she spoke about Wyoming with a sense of connection that went far beyond memory. It represented the foundation of her character, the roots of her calm, and the place where her early identity began to form. These first years shaped the quiet strength that would carry her through the rest of her life. But childhood lessons were only the beginning. The ranch would finish what Wyoming started. Strength does not always grow out of dramatic moments or painful struggles. Sometimes it grows from simple routines, early mornings, and responsibilities that force a young person to act older than their age. For Dana Perino, the summers she spent on her grandfather's ranch became the place where her character took on a sharper shape. She was still a child, but the ranch did not treat her like one. It required steady work, patience, and the ability to handle discomfort without complaining. These summers quietly taught her the habits she would later rely on as an adult who needed to stay calm in stressful situations. Every morning on the ranch began before the sun was up. Dana learned quickly that animals did not care about anyone's schedule. They needed to be fed, watered, and taken care of on time. She carried heavy buckets of water, even though she was small. She helped mend fences even when her hands got tired. She cleaned stalls filled with dirt and waste because it had to be done, not because she felt like doing it. These tasks showed her that the world keeps moving, whether you are ready or not. The ranch did not give her time to hesitate or overthink. It simply expected her to do what needed to be done. The physical work was hard, especially for someone her age, but it taught her a kind of responsibility that children in easier environments often do not experience. She learned that finishing a task gave a kind of quiet satisfaction. She learned that routines build stability. She learned that when you show up every day and do what is required, people trust you more. These lessons did not feel special at the time. They felt like normal life. But later, when she entered high-pressure workplaces, she realized how much these early experiences helped her stay grounded. The ranch also taught her emotional endurance. When you work around animals and nature, things do not always go according to plan. Sometimes fences break. Sometimes animals get sick. Sometimes the work doubles without warning. She learned to accept changes calmly. She learned to adjust without making excuses. These moments taught her that getting upset does not fix anything. What fixes things is effort, patience, and stepping back into the task. This way of thinking became a part of her personality and showed up later in her career, especially when she had to deal with unexpected challenges. The discipline she practiced during ranch summers carried over into her school years. By her early teens, Dana was already used to waking up early, completing tasks, and managing her time. So when she started working part-time jobs, these habits helped her succeed. She got a job with a local PBS affiliate where she learned the basics of media. Even though she was still young, she handled responsibilities like setting up equipment and helping with production. She also worked at a radio station, often late at night, where she learned how to operate soundboards and manage small tasks without supervision. These early jobs required her to act maturely, while other teenagers were spending their free time relaxing. Dana was learning skills, building a work ethic, and showing a level of discipline that surprised many people. She woke up before dawn to get to work. She stayed late after shifts to help clean up. She took her responsibilities seriously, even though she was young. These habits became part of her identity. They shaped the quiet confidence she later displayed in her professional life. When she spoke on television as an adult, people often admired her calm. But that calm had been built long before, during the early mornings and late nights of her teenage years. During these same years, she also experienced a small but meaningful loss that stayed with her. Her childhood Bible, filled with illustrations she loved, disappeared during a family move. It was a book she used to carry with her, and it had brought her comfort during quiet childhood moments. Losing it left her with a sense of sadness she could not fully express. Years later, when someone mailed her the same edition, she felt an unexpected rush of emotion. It reminded her of how fragile childhood attachments can be and how certain memories stay inside the heart even when the object itself is gone. The moment she received that book again reminded her of everything she had quietly carried from those early years. Looking back, the ranch and her early jobs created a pattern that defined her personality. She learned how to control her reactions. She learned how to listen before speaking. She learned how to finish what she started. She learned that staying steady often matters more than being loud. People later thought her calmness came naturally, but it was actually the result of years of practicing self-control in environments where complaining didn't solve problems and emotional outbursts didn't help anyone. These early habits prepared her for challenges she would one day face in Washington and on national television. The ranch also gave her a clear understanding of consistency and perseverance. When she later faced complicated political situations or stressful interviews, she used the same skills she had learned as a child. Stay focused, do the work, and remain steady even when things feel overwhelming. The calm she displayed as an adult was not something she learned in a classroom or through training. It was something that grew slowly from the chores she did each summer, from the routines she followed, and from the responsibility she accepted long before anyone knew her name. These experiences did more than give her discipline. They shaped her view of the world. She learned that life rarely rewards complaining. She learned that success comes from effort, not luck. She learned that strength is often quiet and steady. These beliefs became central to her character and influenced the way she approached every part of her adult life. But the next chapter would test whether grit alone could survive ambition. Some people enter Washington with loud ambition, strong connections, or big promises. Dana Perino did not. She arrived quietly, with no well-known last name, no political family behind her, and no one waiting to open doors. She simply came as a young woman who wanted to work, learn, and build a life in a city where confidence often matters more than experience. In a place where people announce themselves boldly, Dana's calm approach made her easy to overlook. But that calm was also her advantage. She listened more than she spoke, learned more than she showed, and slowly began to find her place in a world that rarely rewarded subtlety. Her first small job in Washington was as a staff assistant. It was not glamorous, and it did not come with recognition or influence. The work included answering phones, sorting documents, taking notes, and helping with whatever tasks needed attention. For some people, such a role might have felt unimportant. But Dana treated every assignment with seriousness. She believed that if she did each task well, something bigger might eventually come from it. This attitude became the foundation of her rise. While others rushed to be noticed, she focused on becoming reliable. Even so, she was underestimated. Washington is full of loud and confident personalities, and Dana's quiet nature made many people assume she wasn't ready for more responsibility. She was small in stature, soft-spoken, and still trying to understand the fast pace of political work. But day after day, she proved herself through consistency. She showed up early, stayed late, and learned quickly. She watched how meetings were run, how decisions were communicated, and how leaders handled pressure. Without trying to impress anyone, she built a reputation as someone who could be trusted. As months turned into years, opportunities began to appear. Her precision and discipline stood out to the people who worked closely with her. She did not make careless mistakes. She did not lose her temper. She did not panic under deadlines. When others grew overwhelmed, she remained steady. This steadiness eventually led her to a larger role, becoming the press secretary for Congressman Dan Schaefer. For a young woman still building her confidence, this was a major step. It put her at the center of communication, gave her a voice in important discussions, and allowed her to develop skills that would shape her future career. Working for Schaefer became an important chapter of her life. He was fair, encouraging, and trusted her ability even when others doubted her. Under his guidance, she wrote statements, handled press questions, and learned how to present information clearly. She also learned how to navigate disagreements and how to stay professional when political tensions rose. This role gave her a sense of purpose. It made her feel like she had found her place in Washington. For the first time, she felt like she belonged in the world she had worked so hard to enter. Then, unexpectedly, everything changed. In 1998, Congressman Schaefer announced he was retiring. The news hit Dana deeply. It was not just the loss of a job. It was the loss of her professional home, her mentor, and the stability she had finally found. Washington is a city where everything can shift quickly, but experiencing that shift firsthand was painful. One announcement from one person erased the entire structure of her working life. She had no plan for what came next. Even worse, she realized how fragile political careers could be. One moment she felt secure. The next, She was facing uncertainty with no clear path forward. This sudden change also exposed her to the harsher side of Washington. People she had worked with became distant. Relationships built through work shifted when her position disappeared. Some who once depended on her support no longer returned her calls. It was a wake-up call about how transactional political environments can be. In Washington, people move on quickly, and those who lose their roles often feel forgotten. Dana felt this sharply. She had worked hard, stayed loyal, and given her best. Yet she found herself jobless and unsure of her place. At just 26 years old, Dana faced a moment many young professionals fear. She was unemployed in a competitive city, surrounded by people who seemed more confident, more connected, and more experienced. She questioned her future. She wondered if she had made a mistake in choosing this path. She felt pressure, fear, and doubt all at once. The structure she had relied on was gone. She had no clear next step. It was a low point that tested her sense of direction and self-worth. This period taught her something important about Washington. The city rewards success, but rarely supports vulnerability. She had to learn how to navigate uncertainty without losing her sense of self. It was also during this difficult time that she realized she needed to find strength within herself, rather than relying on external validation. She began to understand that her resilience, not her job title, would determine her future. This mindset became essential later when she faced even bigger challenges. In this uncertain chapter, Dana also discovered that her quietness did not mean weakness. While she felt lost, she did not break down. She took small steps, kept searching, and stayed open to possibilities even when she doubted herself. She did not let despair control her decisions. Instead, she tried to stay practical and calm, the same way she had learned to stay steady during her childhood and ranch years. But she also felt the emotional weight of losing the life she had worked hard to build. Just when she felt directionless, unsure, and ready to consider leaving Washington entirely, one unexpected encounter would redirect her entire life. Love can rescue a person, but it can also reroute their entire path in ways they never expect. For Dana Perino, this truth entered her life on a simple flight from Denver to Chicago. She boarded the plane exhausted, unsure about her future, and carrying the heavy feeling of losing her career in Washington. She took her seat without imagining that the man beside her would become the most important person in her life. His name was Peter McMahon. He was older, calm, polite, and carried himself with a maturity that immediately made her feel safe. Their conversation began naturally, without pressure or awkwardness. She noticed his wedding ring and assumed he was married, only to learn later that he was divorced and starting over in his own way. Despite the age difference and the unplanned meeting, something between them felt unusually steady. After that flight, their connection deepened. They exchanged letters, made phone calls, and tried to keep a long-distance relationship alive while living on different continents. It was not easy. Dana was still young and unsure about the direction of her career, while Peter had already experienced more of life. Yet the distance did not weaken their bond. Instead, it made them more intentional about every conversation. Each message became meaningful. Each visit carried weight. Their relationship grew without drama, built on trust, patience, and two people who understood the value of kindness. Within a year, they got married. Their wedding was small and quiet, chosen deliberately rather than influenced by outside expectations. Dana did not marry Peter because he fit into her career plans. She married him because she felt at peace with him. He made her feel grounded during a time when nothing else in her life felt stable. Their marriage was the beginning of a chapter she never predicted, a chapter shaped not by ambition but by companionship. Soon after their wedding, they moved to England for Peter's work. This move brought a deep shift into Dana's life. She had spent years trying to build a career in Washington, and now she found herself in a country where she had no professional network, no job, and no clear sense of belonging. Life in England was not unkind, But it was quiet, too quiet for someone who once felt the energy of political offices and daily deadlines. She often felt isolated. She walked through unfamiliar streets with a mixture of curiosity and loneliness. She tried to adjust, but at the same time, she felt herself drifting away from the world she had worked so hard to enter. There were days when she questioned whether she had lost her professional identity. Her time in Washington had given her a sense of purpose, even if it had been stressful. Now, living abroad, she felt like she was watching her dreams fade from a distance. She wondered if she would ever return to the work she loved. She wondered if she had traded her ambitions for a life she had not planned. These emotions did not come with anger or regret. They came quietly, in small moments she kept to herself. Yet, despite the uncertainty, living with Peter gave her a different kind of growth. She learned patience. She learned how to build a life as part of a couple rather than as an individual. She learned to appreciate routines that were not tied to political schedules. But she also learned what it meant to feel disconnected from a career she once believed would shape her future. The move forced her to slow down, and slowing down made her confront questions about who she was without her work. Everything changed after the attacks of the 11th of September, 2001. Watching the events unfold from across the ocean shook her deeply. It reminded her why she had wanted to work in public service in the first place. It reminded her that communication, leadership, and national stability mattered. The tragedy gave her a renewed sense of duty. She knew she needed to return to the United States not just physically, but professionally. When she and Peter moved back, she arrived with a clearer purpose. She wanted to serve again. She wanted to contribute to something meaningful. Returning to America did not solve everything immediately. She still had to rebuild her career from the ground up, but she no longer felt aimless. The time in England had changed her. It had humbled her, centered her, and clarified what truly mattered. When she eventually re-entered public service, she brought with her a deeper sense of maturity and a stronger understanding of how fragile life can be. During these years, another quiet truth grew in her life. The realization that she and Peter would never have children. There was no dramatic moment, no final conversation, no medical crisis. It was simply the slow passing of time, combined with the demands of her career and the natural differences in age. She loved deeply, worked hard, traveled often, and made choices that filled her life in many ways. But the awareness that motherhood would not be part of her journey settled softly, almost respectfully, into her heart. She did not complain about it. She did not blame anyone. She simply learned to accept it with grace, even if the acceptance carried a small ache inside it. Her marriage with Peter became the center of her emotional life. He supported her, not with grand gestures, but with steadiness. He moved with her when her work required it. He listened when she struggled. He added stability during the most uncertain moments. Their marriage survived long-distance beginnings, career upheaval, relocation, and years of demanding work schedules. It was not a perfect love story, but it was a real one, built on loyalty, effort, and mutual respect. Dana's return to America marked the beginning of her professional rebirth. She stepped back into public life with new wisdom and a stronger sense of who she was. But fate was waiting to introduce her to someone who would change not only her career, but her soul. Some mentors teach skills, but a few teach something much deeper. When Tony Snow entered Dana Perino's life, he became more than a supervisor or a colleague. He became the person who shaped her confidence, her voice, and her understanding of what it meant to communicate with both strength and kindness. Tony had a personality that made people feel welcome. He was charismatic but gentle, smart but never condescending, and confident without being intimidating. Dana admired him immediately. Working with him felt like being guided by someone who saw her potential even before she fully believed in it herself. Tony had a way of lifting people up. When Dana spoke too softly, he encouraged her to speak with clarity. When she doubted herself, he reminded her that she had already earned her place. When she stepped back, he nudged her forward. In meetings, he treated her as an equal, even though she was still learning. He used humor to ease tension and gave honest feedback without making her feel small. Each interaction strengthened her confidence. She began to trust her own voice because he trusted it first. It was the kind of mentorship that shapes not just a career, but an entire outlook on life. As time passed, their working relationship grew into something more personal. Dana often described him as the big brother she never had. He looked out for her in a protective way, whether she was heading into a difficult briefing or dealing with a challenging reporter. He taught her how to stay steady when criticism became loud. He taught her that you can be firm without being harsh and confident without being aggressive. He showed her that leadership can be warm and that kindness is not a weakness. These lessons stayed with her long after he was gone. Then, everything changed. When Tony was diagnosed with cancer, Dana felt the news hit her with a weight she had not expected. Seeing someone so strong suddenly vulnerable was heartbreaking. Yet even during treatment, Tony tried to keep his spirit alive. He continued mentoring her, continued checking in, and continued encouraging her. But his energy faded. His smile, still present, carried exhaustion behind it. Dana saw the physical toll, the slower movements, the fatigue in his eyes, and it hurt deeply. She did not talk about this pain publicly. She kept it inside, protecting both his dignity and her own emotions. When Tony had to step back from his duties, Dana was asked to cover his role. It was one of the hardest moments of her career. She wanted to do well, not only for the job, but for him. She wanted him to be proud. Every time she stood at the podium, she felt both the pressure of the country's attention and the quiet ache of missing his presence beside her. She handled the briefings with professionalism, but each day carried a sense of longing. She wished he could return. She wished he could stand next to her again. She wished things were different. The emotional pressure was constant. She knew the work mattered, but she also knew her friend was fighting for his life. Balancing both realities strained her heart more than she ever admitted. She often held herself together in front of others, only to release her emotions when she was finally alone. Still, she continued. She stayed steady in public because she believed she owed that to the people she served and to Tony, who had taught her how to remain strong under pressure. When the news finally came that Tony had passed away, Dana broke down privately. The grief was deep and heavy. She had lost a mentor, a protector, and someone who had believed in her as few people ever had. She mourned not only the man, but the guidance, the laughter, and the understanding he brought into her life. On the day she wrote her tribute to him, she struggled to put her feelings into words. She wanted to honor him, but every sentence carried pain. She rewrote it several times, wiping away tears each time. No one saw the emotional collapse behind closed doors. The public saw her professionalism. Only she felt the full weight of the loss. Tony's death changed her. It rewired something inside her. She became more compassionate and more aware of how fragile life is. She became more patient with others, understanding that everyone carries unseen struggles. She also became more confident because she carried Tony's lessons with her. When she spoke, she sometimes heard his voice in her mind, reminding her to stay calm or encouraging her to trust her instincts. His teachings lived on inside her, shaping the way she approached leadership, communication, and responsibility. His influence touched every part of her future work. When she later faced high-pressure moments, she leaned on the steadiness he had taught her. When she mentored younger colleagues, she tried to give them the same encouragement he once gave her. When she spoke on television, her clarity reflected his guidance. In many ways, her public presence became a living extension of the values he instilled in her. She never forgot the impact he had. She never stopped carrying him with her. Losing Tony also showed her that strength is not the absence of grief. It is learning how to carry grief without letting it stop you. It is the ability to keep moving forward while holding on to the memory of someone who shaped you. Dana honored his memory not through speeches or public displays, but through the way she conducted herself every day. Tony's life gave her confidence. His death gave her perspective. Together, these experiences shaped the kind of leader she would become in the years ahead. They gave her the maturity she needed for challenges she had not yet faced. They gave her emotional depth that viewers would later feel, even if they did not know where it came from. And with her heart still bruised from losing him, life was about to place her in a role that would demand every ounce of strength he helped her build. The cameras saw composure, but they never saw the cost. When Dana Perino became the second female White House press secretary in American history, most people only noticed the calm young woman standing at the podium. They saw her answer difficult questions without raising her voice. They saw her steady hands, measured words, and respectful tone. But what they did not see was how much pressure she carried behind that calm exterior. The job was more than speaking on behalf of a president. It was the responsibility of explaining a nation's decisions, managing crises, and handling a room full of reporters who were ready to challenge every sentence. It demanded clarity, honesty, and emotional control every single day. The White House press room is not an easy place. Each question carries weight. Each word can become a headline. Each mistake can spark controversy. Dana faced this pressure 5 days a week, often more. Some reporters were fair, others were not. Some days the news was simple, but many days it involved war, national fears, or political conflict. She could not show frustration. She could not raise her voice. She could not let nerves show. She had to stay in control even when situations were stressful, fast-moving, or emotionally heavy. It was daily combat, but she fought it with professionalism instead of aggression. The mental and physical toll of the job grew quickly. Her days often began before sunrise and ended long after the rest of America had gone to sleep. She prepared for briefings, met with advisors, reviewed documents, and practiced key points. She had to know not just what the president believed, but why he believed it, how he explained it, and how it might affect the country. She lived in a constant state of readiness. Even when she tried to rest, her mind stayed alert. The stress kept her awake at night, and even when she slept, the sleep was shallow. She carried the weight of knowing that every word mattered. Behind the scenes, she faced moments of doubt that the public never saw. There were times she wondered if she was strong enough. Times when the criticism felt heavier than usual. Times when she feared a small mistake could damage her reputation or hurt the administration. But she learned to push through these fears. She reminded herself that she had worked hard to get there. She relied on the discipline she had built since childhood and on the lessons Tony Snow had taught her. Even when she felt overwhelmed, she did not allow it to show. Her professionalism became the shield she carried every day. There were also moments when the pressure became too much to hold inside. Hidden panic would rise unexpectedly, especially on days when the news was difficult and the questions unforgiving. She never allowed these moments to happen in public. When she felt her breath shorten or her heart race, she would step away quietly. Sometimes she locked herself in a bathroom just to breathe and gather her thoughts. These moments were private, and she kept them secret. No one watching the briefing room would have guessed how close she sometimes came to breaking down. Her strength was not the absence of fear. It was the ability to recover quickly and step back into the spotlight as if nothing had happened. The emotional price was not hers alone to carry. Peter also felt the strain of her job. He watched her come home exhausted, sometimes unable to speak much because her mind was still processing the day. Some nights she lay awake, thinking about the next briefing. Some mornings she left before he was fully awake. Their time together became limited, and their conversations often revolved around schedules, travel, and stress. Peter supported her with patience, but he also worried. He saw how much the job drained her. He saw how hard she tried to stay strong. He saw the toll it took on her physical and emotional well-being. Loving someone in such a demanding role required understanding, but it also required quiet concern. As the Bush administration neared its end, the pressure intensified. The country was tired, divided, and facing complex challenges. Dana was often at the center of the storm, answering questions that carried political, emotional, and national weight. She gave everything she had, even as she felt herself wearing down. When the administration finally ended in January 2009, she walked out of the White House with a deep sense of pride, but also with emotional scars. The years of constant stress had taken a toll on her. She felt drained, worn out, and unsure of what she wanted to do next. The burnout she experienced was not dramatic or sudden. It was quiet and steady, the kind that builds after months and years of carrying heavy responsibilities. She needed space to think, space to breathe, and space to remember who she was outside of the role she had just finished. The end of the administration left her with time, but also with questions. What did she want her life to look like now? Where did she belong next? She had spent so long speaking for someone else that she barely remembered what it felt like to speak only for herself. Walking away from the White House felt like stepping into a wide, empty space. She had achieved something historic, yet she felt more tired than triumphant. The strain on her health, her marriage, and her spirit was deep. She could have ended her public life right there. She could have stepped back permanently, choosing rest and privacy over returning to another demanding role. Many people in her position would have done exactly that. She had nothing left to prove. She could have disappeared from public life forever, but destiny had other plans. You can leave the White House, but the White House never fully leaves you. When Dana Perino stepped out of that world in 2009, she carried both relief and exhaustion. She needed distance from the pressure, but she also needed a new purpose. She wasn't sure what direction her life would take next. What she did know was that she was not done contributing. So, when the opportunity came to transition into television, she took a step that would begin her professional rebirth. At first, she wasn't sure she belonged in broadcast journalism. She had always been more comfortable behind the scenes, preparing others to speak. But television offered something she didn't expect: the ability to serve the public without carrying the weight of the entire government on her shoulders. When she joined Fox News, her calm presence quickly stood out. She was not loud, dramatic, or confrontational. She explained things clearly, respectfully, and without unnecessary emotion. Viewers appreciated that. They saw in her someone who brought steadiness to discussions that often felt chaotic. She wasn't trying to dominate conversations, she was trying to bring clarity. Over time, this approach became her signature. Her presence gave people a sense of balance during intense news cycles, and she became a trusted voice for millions across the country. Her role on The Five helped her connect with audiences in a way that was different from her time in the White House. On that show, she could share opinions, offer perspective, and even show moments of humor. She began to feel comfortable sharing more of her personality, not just her professionalism. Later, her work on America's Newsroom strengthened her reputation even further. She was still calm, still steady, but now she was also guiding news coverage and helping viewers make sense of the events happening around them. The trust she built with audiences was not based on shouting or strong displays of emotion. It came from consistency. People felt they could rely on her. But even as her career flourished, the emotional residue from the White House years stayed with her. The long nights, the anxiety, the habit of expecting something urgent at any moment. These patterns were hard to break. She had spent so many years waking up at 3 a.m. to prepare for the day that her body still reacted as if a crisis could happen at any time. Sometimes she would jolt awake in the middle of the night, her mind racing through imaginary scenarios. She no longer carried the weight of national briefings, but the feeling of needing to be ready never completely faded. Certain sounds or situations could trigger memories from her White House years. A breaking news alert, a tense discussion, a reminder of a difficult moment she had once handled. She would later explain that even though she had left the role, it had left a mark on her. This wasn't trauma in a dramatic sense. It was simply the long-term imprint of years spent under constant pressure. It shaped her instincts and reactions, and some part of her carried that burden quietly. Even as she managed these inner challenges, she continued to build a life with Peter that felt fuller and more balanced than before. Their home became a place of comfort, and their dog, Jasper, became an essential part of their family. Jasper was not just a pet, he was their daily joy, their routine, their companion, and the presence that brought softness into a life that had held too much seriousness for too long. Viewers also loved him. They followed his pictures, his stories, and his appearances on television. He became known as America's dog, and in many ways, he truly was. In 2021, Jasper passed away, and the loss shattered Dana. The public saw her cry on air, something she rarely did. But even that public moment did not reflect the full depth of her grief. At home, the pain was stronger. Jasper had filled spaces in her life that went far beyond the role of a pet. He had given her comfort during anxiety. He had been her companion during lonely moments. He had been her source of daily happiness. Losing him felt like losing a piece of her heart. The outpouring of sympathy from viewers was large and sincere, but the private collapse that followed was something only she and Peter truly understood. For a while, the house felt painfully quiet. She missed Jasper's footsteps, his presence, the small routines they shared. She tried to continue her work as usual, but the sadness lingered. Grief does not move quickly, and for her, this loss reopened emotional spaces she had kept closed for years. It reminded her of every loss she had carried: Tony, her childhood book, her early identity, her own quiet sacrifices. Jasper had softened those wounds simply by being part of her world. His absence brought them back into view. Then came Percy, a new puppy filled with energy and innocence. Percy did not replace Jasper, no one could, but he brought warmth back into their home. He reminded Dana and Peter that healing does not erase the past, but helps you live with it. Percy became part of their routine, their laughter, and their comfort. His presence helped ease the sadness, even though the memories of Jasper remained deeply cherished. Percy gave Dana a new kind of emotional balance, but some losses never disappear completely, and she understood that. Professionally, she remained strong, respected, and steady. But privately, she was a woman who had learned to live with both success and sorrow, often at the same time. Her work on television kept her connected to the country. Her marriage kept her grounded. Her dogs kept her heart open. Yet behind all of this, she carried a quiet understanding of how fragile life can be. And just when life finally seemed soft again, time revealed its most painful truth.